Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 30-Minute Gospel. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host as we open and study the Bible together. I'll be reading from the King James Version, but you can feel free to read whichever translation that best suits you. I would just recommend that you have a version that does not delete verses from God's holy word. Each video will be a biblical teaching of 30 minutes or less. My material is completely 100% free, so you can share these videos with family members, co-workers, friends, or anyone you know who either needs to hear the Word of God or wants to study in a casual setting. The gospel is free to all, so I will not accept any donations, gifts, or beg viewers for money. Please give to your local church or a Christian organization of your choosing. You can reach out to me with questions or comments at 30minutegospel@gmail.com, but please keep your message respectful and cordial. Please also remember to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy the Christian content presented here. You can also follow me on Facebook at 30 Minute Gospel with Chris. Well, welcome again, everybody. We're continuing on where we left off. This is a video series on Daniel chapter 2. We're talking about the very famous statue that the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had in the last video, just kind of to kind of rehash what we talked about. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He asked the dream greatly disturbed him. He asked his magic men, astrologers, and sorcerers, and all these people, to tell him what the dream was, and the interpretation. They told him, no, we can only just tell us what the dream was, and we'll tell you in the interpretation. He said, basically saying, look, if you're real, you should be able to know. If you're really there, you should the God should reveal to you what I've dreamed. And they said that's impossible, and he said, okay, well then I'm going to kill you all. And so Daniel said, no, 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 only God can tell me what it is. Don't kill anybody. God will let me know. And then God gave him that interpretation of the dream, and he told him that you saw the statue, that had the head of gold, the arms and chest of silver, okay, the midsection and thighs, the pelvic region and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, and then the feet that are part iron and part clay. Okay? And we're going to talk about how this is a prophecy. As I said in the book of Daniel and Revelation, there's a lot of prophecy in Daniel. Okay? Daniel, of course, was serving Nebuchadnezzar. He was a eunuch. But that doesn't mean the Lord put him in a very prestigious spot, even though he was serving him, just like he did it many times. He did it with Joseph and Pharaoh. He was serving to Pharaoh. Now Pharaoh was a pagan king, but God blessed Joseph into that big promising position, to help save his people from starvation and bringing them down to the land of Egypt. So he was in charge down there. Mordecai is going. Not only does Esther become King Xerxes' favorite wife, but he also places Mordecai in a very high position within the Persian Empire. Okay, and in the same thing, Daniel is going to be very, very highly respected, a Jew amongst all of the Babylonians and things like that. Even though he didn't bow the knee to their gods. Now, the interesting thing is Daniel and the book of Revelation are sister books. They basically go together. To read them, you see a lot of the things that is mentioned in the book of Revelation. Why? Because Daniel's book was the book of the end times. Okay? And as I explained in a previous video, I believe that if the Jews had accepted Jesus Christ when he was on this earth, the Daniel's 70th week would have continued on. That's what it was, because the 69 weeks, which is mentioned there, was completed up until Jesus' death. And then the 70th week would have continued on, meaning the rapture of the church, or the rapture would have happened. The 7 year the peace treaty would have probably happened between Rome and the rest of the world and them, and then the tribulation would have happened. Then Jesus would have returned, in whatever time, 70 AD, if you want to do it like that, and he would have ruled and reigned and all of this. But when the Jews rejected that, okay, because that's what the book of Daniel did. When the Jews rejected that, what it did was God said, okay, there's this time of the of grace, the time of the church, the time of the Gentiles, which has been going on for 2,000 years. Okay, but the book of Revelation was written to remind them, hey, this stuff is still going to happen, but it's going to happen in a little bit different way because of the way the Jews chose. Okay, so the tribulation is still going to come, but now there's going to be this antichrist figure who is going to have a beast system, and this is all, so it's kind of detailing it more. It's basically, the book of Revelation is detailing what Daniel talks about with the antichrist, the covenant, all these other things. It's the same thing, but he's giving more details. John is giving more details, and also there's a few changes to the program now because the Jews rejected. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so where we left off, we're going to read verses 36 through 45 here. We're going right through Daniel. It's just an expository on Daniel chapter 2 and a teaching on this, okay? So it says this, in verse 36, Daniel speaking, he goes, "This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold." Okay, so the head of gold here is the Babylonian Empire. Okay, this is Nebuchadnezzar and his descendants, which last, the head of gold is Babylonian Empire. It lasts from approximately 609 BC to 539 DC. Um, this empire eventually falls with Belshazzar. This is spoken of in Daniel chapter 5. Many of y'all will know that Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. And what happened was he was throwing a banquet, with all these people, and he was drunk. And so what he decided to do was bring the treasuries from the temple and use them in a basically a sacrilegious way. He's doing all these kind of things to desecrate. Whereas, Daniel basically kind of tells him, it's like, look, your dad, your grandfather had more reverence for us than you do, that he had a little bit of respect for this. You have disrespected this. And that's what happened is, while they're at that banquet, they have the very famous hand that writes on the wall, and it says, "You have been found wanting, and your empire is going to be taken away from you." And it was writing, it was basically Hebrew on the wall, and Daniel interpreted it. And then it was that day that, in 519 BC, I'm sorry, 539 BC, that the Persians came in and destroyed Babylon, took it over, and the Persian Empire will take over from there. Okay, and it's that very famous writing of the wall. So that's done that. Okay, so going to starting in verse 39, it says, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth." Okay, now here's the one thing. It says, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom." Okay, so there's this head of gold. Okay, then you have the chest and arms of silver. Okay, as you know, silver is less valuable than gold is. As we know, silver is is still a very powerful means of payment for things. As you know, Judas, what sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, so did Delilah. Delilah turned over Samson to the Philistines for silver. Silver's still very valuable, but it's not as valuable as gold. Okay, so what he's saying is, this empire is not going to be as superior to your empire as, or it's not going to be as superior to your empire, but it's still going to be a major empire. And the silver empire is the chest and arms of silver. This is the Medes and the Persian Empire, okay? And the arms represent the two sides, the Medes and the Persians, and they're always crossed in the statue like this. The reason why is because they're working together. Okay, the Medes and Persians are two different groups of people, but they're going to be working together. All right, as an empire. The Persians, the Persians are what is modern day Iran. Okay, that's modern day Iran. Now the people of Iran today, all right, it was called Persia up until the early 1900s. They didn't change their name until sometime in the early 1900s to Iran, but it was always called Persia. Persia people are very smart people. They're not dumb because the Persians created the game of chess. That's where the game of chess came from. Okay, and but the people there in Iran today are not the Persians of old. The people that control Iran are Arabs. Those are the people from Saudi Arabia. The Persian people were different. Persia is where Zoroastrianism comes in, which is, some of y'all know that religion and stuff. But mainly now it's being run by Muslims. But it's not. But it was not Muslim people that were there. That Muslims didn't come and take Iran over until you're looking like 800, 900 AD, somewhere in there. Okay, so this is before then. But the Persian Empire is going to come in, and the Medes and the Persians are going to rule from 539 to 328 BC. Now, all these people that are ruling, I want y'all to understand, are the people ruling Israel, not the world. Okay? This is a prophecy about the empires who are going to have some significant say within the Jewish population, okay, not the whole world, okay, because if you know anything, the Medes and the Persians didn't control China, they didn't control all of Africa, they didn't, but this is not dealing with those nations, it's just dealing with the nations that are going to deal with the nation of Israel. Okay, and how they are. So it's more this prophecy, although it's a dream for Nebuchadnezzar, it's kind of a prophecy for the nation of Israel. Okay, and then eventually the world. Okay, so the Medes and the Persians rule over here. Cyrus is their first king. He's the one who signs the decree for the Jews to return to Israel after 70 years of captivity in 539 BC. Now, his name is mentioned twice in the book of Isaiah 200 years before that happens. But this is also spoken of in the first chapters I think it's like the last chapter of Second Chronicles and the first chapters of the book of Ezra speak about Cyrus's decree, okay, to go back to for the Jews to return, okay, to Israel. Cyrus was known as Cyrus the Great, and this is actually verified in history that Cyrus allowed them to go back there. His I believe his son-in-law is Darius. I know some people say Darius, but it's Darius. But he allows them to go back over there. He's going to die in battle, and then Darius takes over. Um, Darius is the one who puts Daniel into the lion's den. Okay, he's the one that Darius is. He sends him to lion's den, and then he's really, because he had violated. He was praying to God, and even though he wasn't supposed to, they signed the law. They had to put him in the lion's den. But of course, you know the story. Daniel's there all night. Nothing happens to him. And then the men who accused him are thrown into the lion's den, and he survives it. Okay, so you know this. Darius is the one who starts. He begins the war with Greece. They start to kind of take over. A lot of the areas of Greece, and some of these groups are rebelling, and so they go to battle. Many of y'all know many of y'all know the war, the Greek-Persian wars, the very famous battle of Marathon. That's where the guy ran 26.2 miles after the battle of Marathon, because the king of Athens was planning to surrender, and the guy ran. They told him, no, don't surrender, because we won at Marathon, and Marathon is 26.2 miles from from Marathon to Athens, and the guy ran 26.2 miles. Told him, "Don't give up. We won." And then he collapses and dies, which just tells me, you shouldn't be running marathons. Uh, but yeah, the Battle of Thermopylae, which was also King Leonidas and the Spartans. Many of y'all know that famous thing from the movie 300, where they set up at the Thermopylae Pass, and they tried to come in, and those 300 people died very valiantly to protect them from the Greek Persians. But that was that war. Darius was already dead by that point. That was Xerxes. Um, Xerxes, of course, is one. He's the husband of Esther. He's the one who gets defeated at the Greek-Persian wars. And then there's Artaxerxes, who's mentioned in the book of Nehemiah, who allows them to return and rebuild the walls in Jerusalem. Okay, so but really, a lot of people don't know this about the Book of Esther. And one day I may do a study on the Book of Esther. Uh, but the Book of Esther should have never been written. That may be a shock to a lot of you, but the Book of Esther should never have been written. The reason why is because Esther took place around 470 BC, somewhere there, 500 to 4, somewhere between 450 to 500 BC. Okay, Cyrus told gave the order, wrote the order for the Jews that they were able to go back to their land in 539. So why were the Jews still in Persia? What were they doing still in Persia? They didn't listen to what God told them to do. After 70 years, they got too comfortable. They're like, I like it here. I don't want to go back. And because of that, that almost cost them. They almost got exterminated for that. You see, it should have never been written. If they had just done what God told them to do, the book of Esther would have never had to happen. Esther wouldn't have had to be queen, queen of Persia. She would have been back. Her family would have been back in the land of Israel where they should have been. And Mordecai wouldn't have been where he was. Why was he still there? He should have been back in the land. He should have been convincing all the Jews to move back. They got complacent. You see, and to this day, Esther's not buried. She's buried in Iran. She's not even buried in the land of the Jews. You see, because they should never have been there. Okay, so that makes sense. So that's the Medes and the Persians. They're going to work together. Okay? Now it says, another third kingdom of brass which shall bear rule over all the earth. Now I want you to understand this. The belly and the thighs of brass, okay, this is the Greek Empire. Okay? After the Greek Persian wars and they are defeated, the Greeks are going to build their empire. And this Greek Empire that they're talking about, now the Greeks have been around for a long time, but this Greek Empire that they're talking about is the last hurrah for the Greek Empire, and that's the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great. Okay, that's what it's talking about. Now I want you to know, Alexander the Great, you see, what had happened was you had this king, you had the head of gold. Okay, then you had the two kingdoms working together. Now it's made out of brass. Basically, Alexander the Great is going to be a dictator. Okay, now Alexander, I want you to notice too where this is located on. You see, God understood this, where it's located on the body of this statue. It's located in the pelvic region. If you ever know anything about the Greek Empire, about the Greeks were sexual deviants. Okay? The Greeks were sexual deviants. Many of the men were having inappropriate relations with young boys. Okay? They groomed them, and that's what and they you know it was no better than what happened at Sodom and Gomorrah. And as a matter of fact, Alexander the Great, the rumors with his friend Hesphagian, they that he was, although he was married, was having a sexual affair with him. Okay, they were obsessed with it. That's what they always were, making lots of artwork with men naked. They were obsessed with sexual deviancy, and that's where that's located on there. There's a reason for that. Okay, it's to let you know that they have no control over their sexual problems. But the Greek Empire lasts from 328 to 63 BC. This is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was from Macedonia, which is right north of Greece. His father was Philip II, who was king of Macedonia. And Alexander it didn't have a very good relationship with his father. He was taught by um, Aristotle. Okay, the student of Plato. He loved Aristotle. He learned so much from him. He took writing lessons as a young man. And it says this. If you notice what it says here. It says, which shall bear rule over all the earth. Okay. Now Alexander's kingdom did not control the whole earth, but it controlled all of the known parts of the earth. Okay, at that time in world history. Okay, there was a lot of there was a he conquered the, I think it's the second most amount of land of any person in history behind Genghis Khan. I think that's the way it goes. I think it's Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. Um, I think either Napoleon and Hitler. They're like the two, but it's Genghis Khan first, and then Alexander the Great, because he conquered Greece, he conquered Persia, he conquered Egypt and good parts of northern Africa and most of the Middle East, and then he went all the way down to India. Okay, uh, he conquered most of the known world. He destroyed the cities of Tyre, which God predicted would happen. He talks about that in Ezekiel, that all of this that their island fortress would be destroyed, and all of their trees and lumber and stones would be cast into the sea. And that's what Alexander the Great did. He built a land bridge. Basically, they cut trees and everything down as much as they could and just stacked up a bridge so he could conquer the island fortress that was out there. Okay, it was kind of like Alcatraz. They had like a little island fortress out there. So he built this whole land bridge to get out there and through all the stubble, just like Ezekiel said. Um, he defeats the Persians. He defeats Darius the Third. He conquers that area. He conquers Egypt and Babylon and things like that. He tried to take over India. India was his biggest mistake, because he thought he was a god. He thought he was undefeated, and so they went to try to conquer this walled city, and they put the ladder up, and he just jumped onto the ladder and went over, thinking he could defeat anything, because he defeat all without his men. The men warned him not to do it, and when the men got up the ladder, they could see he was wounded, and they pulled him from that wound. They pulled him from there, and he survived that wound, but his immune system was very, very weakened. He drank a lot, and then when his friend or possible lover Hesphagian died, it wasn't long after that he died at 33 years old. Okay, and 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 they told him, they asked him, who are you going to leave who are you going to leave the kingdom to? And he famously said, to the strongest. Those were his last words before he died. He didn't leave it to his children at all. Okay, now it's interesting, Daniel also predicts something in Daniel 8:8. If you'll go with me to Daniel 8:8, he's talking about the same Greek Empire. He says, and the goat that he's referring to is the Greek Empire, which is ironic again, because sometimes goats are known as a kind of another term we use for people or whose sexual desires are out of control. They're like goats, there's the H word they use them. They call H goats, and so what do the Greeks have problems with? It's this. So they use the goat as a reference to him. It says, therefore, the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Okay, so here it is. His empire is going to be divided into four, which is Daniel predicts that, and that's exactly what happens. Okay, Alexander's empire is going to be divided amongst four people. The Ptolemy family is going to take over Egypt, which he built his famous city of Alexandria, which became the capital. Okay, it's named for him. The Ptolemies, the last Ptolemy to serve was Cleopatra. Okay, so those people take over. There's also some other Greek groups that take over. I can't remember all their names right offhand, but it's going to be uh, uh, one of those four people are going to take over. Okay, and the Greeks are going to be very involved with the Jewish people. You might be saying, well, how do they have what do they have with the Jewish people? We know the Persians have the Jews, with Esther and everything. We know the Babylonians have them. Well, they're famous for the Maccabean revolt. They were control of Israel at that time. The Maccabean revolt happened in 168 BC, where the Greek ruler in that area named Antiochus Epiphanes, he goes in and slaughters a pig in the second temple. Okay, he goes in and desecrates the second temple by slaughtering a pig there. As you know, pigs are not kosher. They're unclean animals, so they're not supposed to be doing that. Now, a lot of people have always thought this was the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, but we know it's not, because Jesus refers to it. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, he said this 200 years almost after this event, so we know this isn't it. Okay, so what happens is a revolt happens led by Judah Maccabee. Maccabee means hammer. They're going to try to get the Jews or get the Greeks out, which they're able to do. And what ends up happening is they reclaim the temple, and they very famously only have enough oil for one day, but God miraculously gets it for 8 days. That's where we get the word Hanukkah from. Okay, they was able to light the oil, miraculously was able to go for 8 straight days. That's where Hanukkah comes from. And the Jewish people did lots of things during that time. Like the Jews would be reading their scriptures and things. When the Greek would come in or see them, they would put the scripture, put it underneath them, and then pull out a thing called a dreidel, and they would be playing with it, so it looks like that's what they were doing. That's why at Hanukkah they play with dreidels. Dreidel, 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 I made you out of clay. Some of you all know that song. Okay, and so Hanukkah comes, and the Jews get a great victory from this. But this is where Hanukkah comes from. Hanukkah was celebrated in the time of Jesus. It talks about that Jesus went up for the festival, was celebrating the festival of lights. It speaks about that in John chapter 10, I think it is. The festival of lights is Hanukkah. It was, and this is all spoken of in the extra biblical text of the Maccabees. They're not in they're not in the Bible, but they are. They explain exactly where Hanukkah came from. Okay, so this is the Greeks did. So they're going to kick the Greeks out. And but we're going to leave it right there. We'll get to the legs and everything, and we'll finish up this in the next video. I thank you all for tuning in, and remember these words, just as Theodore Roosevelt once said, a thorough knowledge of the Bible is worth more than a college education. God bless you all.